Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. We're going to take a look at David Pakman's video called Debunked Socialism Has Never Worked. We're going to start at 3 minutes and 23 seconds, and he's going to give some quotes that show that socialism's an old thing. It's not anything new. Don't worry about it. It was in the Bible. And the reason we are interested in this right now is because, strangely enough, the Old Testament injunctions seem to me to be perfectly moral, or at least, standard moral stuff that a regular person wouldn't mind seeing in their society. The New Testament stuff seems to be downright wicked, every single bit of it. So let's take a look.
Socialistic ideals are seen being portrayed in the Hebrew Bible, which in many places says that people should be treated equally and that we should be generous to the have-nots.
Now, is that we can be generous to the have-nots and we can treat everyone equally? Is that reasonable? That's a reasonable injunction, right?
Book of Leviticus says you shall not oppress or exploit your neighbor.
Love your neighbor as yourself. Don't oppress or exploit your neighbor. Leviticus.
Of your neighbor as yourself.
God enacts justice for orphans and widows, and he loves immigrants, giving them food and clothing. That means you must also love immigrants because you were immigrants. Now, we can have argument about debate, couldn't we? But let's just admit that a lot of people in the United States of America came from people who emigrated to America. So if we just don't worry about the current debate that's going on the southern border and look at the larger fact of immigration, yes, it's a moral injunction to say that people who are forced out of their homeland deserve sympathy or whatever, okay? And that's, again, Old Testament. A perfectly moral injunction. Maybe it shouldn't be considered a virtue. It shouldn't be made part of law, but it's not expressly wicked, right?
And he says God enacts justice for orphans and widows, and he loves immigrants, giving them food and clothing. That means you must also love immigrants because you were immigrants. Don't take advantage of poor or needy workers, whether they are fellow Israelites or immigrants who live in your land.
Don't take advantage of poor or needy workers. Now, we can question the wiseness of it economically. We can question the moral motive, but it's not an on its face wicked injunction, right? It's a reasonable injunction that a reasonable man walking the street could say, yeah, of course you shouldn't take advantage of poor or needy workers.
Your cities. From Ecclesiastes, it is God's gift to humankind that everyone should eat and drink.
Now that's a little commie-like, right? But it's just saying, do not deprive any man of the right to eat and drink. He can get his own food and water. Doesn't say that somebody will provide it for him. It says God will provide it for him. But this one might be stretching it a little, but not much. All right.
From Psalms, give justice to the weak and the fatherless, maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute.
Now this is pretty good. Give justice to the weak and the fatherless, maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute, rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked.
Rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked.
What's wrong with that?
This might get awkward for anti-socialist Christian conservatives, but the New Testament is also chock full of socialist theme.
Now that Old Testament stuff wasn't necessarily socialist, it's just general moral injunction. Indeed, stuff that seems to be absolutely absent in socialist societies.
Jesus advocated that all people, including governments, should provide for the poor and distribute resources according to people's needs.
See, now we're getting downright wicked.
Quotes from the New Testament: all who believed were together and had all things in common, and they sold their possessions and goods and divided them among all
men, as every man had need. Absolutely wicked. You see, we change a tune there. We turn a sharp corner when you go from the Old Testament to the New Testament.
As every man had need. And the multitude of them that believed were of one heart and of one soul.
Of one heart and one soul. Collectivism. Neither said any of them that aught of the things which he possessed was his own, but they had all things in common.
There said any of them
wicked.
That aught of the things which he possessed was his own, but they had all things in common. If you would be perfect, go, sell what you possess and give to the poor.
Now that goes on to say, sell what you possess, give to the poor, and follow me, and preach the word of the Lord. Look at the lilies of the field. They toil not, and yet God provides for them. Yeah, they actually do toil. They've got their roots in the ground, and they're sucking nutrition out every second, and they've got their leaves pointed at the sun, and they're photosynthesizing every second. So you've got to live like a man. You've got to do what human beings do, and the plant is doing what plants do. It doesn't uproot and go off and go fishing, right? The plant does its thing. So that it's a wicked injunction, and it starts here. If you would be perfect, go sell what you possess and give to the poor.
When you give a feast, invite the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you.
Now, the beginning of it's one thing, but because they cannot repay you, give to them because they cannot repay you. So, giving to people who cannot repay you is for you will be blessed because they can't pay you. Meaning, if you give to someone who does pay you, there's no good there. No good's done for anybody. See, that's a grumpy, mean-spirited, angry, hateful view.
Distribution was made unto every man according as he had need.
Expressly wicked. You see, this is the New Testament. Wicked as you
To
please.
take another religious example, in
All right, now it goes on to Zoroastrianism. Well, that's a self-contained video, ladies and gentlemen. The Old Testament versus the New Testament. The Old Testament, sort of common sense morality. The New Testament, expressly wicked, collectivist, anti-human garbage. There you are. The New Testament was post-Plato and was in light of Greek philosophy, Plato specifically. The Old Testament was what? Bronze Age myths? A big mishmash of Bronze Age myths? Well, there you are. That's my view of it.